Our friends Josh and Sandy were firm believers in ghosts and claimed to have seen the mysterious red-haired phantom that haunted Route 44. My wife and I were sitting with them at dinner one night, and we started kidding them about it. Funny how we've never seen him, and we drive that stretch of road all the time, my wife Jill drawled. You skeptic, Sandy said, emphasizing the word as if we were a curse. One of these days, you're gonna find out I'm right, and you'll owe me a pizza. If I ever see the ghostly hitchhiker, I'll buy you a large pizza every day for a year, I promise. The evening ended pleasantly, and it was long before Jill and I were driving home through the crisp fall air. Let's take Route 44, Jill said suddenly, flashing me a sideways look. Hoping to see a ghost, I chuckled, taking the turn as she directed. Ha! Jill snorted defensively. She yawned and turned her head to face the passenger window. Suddenly, she let out a shriek of sheer terror. I jumped and glanced sideways, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. A red-haired man with bushy beard, wearing a plaid shirt and blue jeans, was running right next to the passenger side of the car. He kept glancing in the window and leering at Jill. Heart pounding in terror, I hit the gas. A moment later, I glanced in the rear-view mirror and saw the red-haired man was sitting in the back seat of our car. I kept looking back and forth between my wife, the phantom, and the road ahead, determined that I was not going to let the red-haired ghost force us into a fatal accident. I glanced towards the back seat for a moment, and the ghost laughed. A laugh that made my teeth tingle and the hairs on my neck stand up. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of the womb, Jesus. Jill grabbed the words of the rosary. Glancing in the mirror, I saw the phantom grimace as she recited the holy words. Then he vanished without a trace. I got us there much faster than the speed limit allowed. I was shaking from head to toe, and Jill was sobbing hysterically. As soon as I pulled into the driveway and turned off the car, I swept my wife into my arms and held her as tightly as I could. We clung together for a long time, until both of us had stopped shaking and Jill's sobs had stopped. I want to go inside, Jill whispered against my neck, and I nodded, not trusting my voice. That night we discussed the incident, but oddly enough, neither of us had nightmares. When we woke up in the morning, I felt much better about the whole thing, until I remembered my promise to Sandy the night before. I groaned out loud, and then clapped a hand over my mouth to not wake my wife. Too late. She opened her green eyes and gave me a sleepy smile. You owe Sandy a year's worth of pizza, Jill said. I most certainly do, I replied, rubbing the back of her neck gently. I most certainly do. He had not expected to meet the woman of his dreams, but there she was, strolling along in the moonlight beside the cemetery. Carlos quickened his pace until he was at level with her, hoping for a glimpse of her face under her veil. Carlos made a few remarks about the beautiful night and the lovely weather, anything to keep her talking. She immediately stopped and turned to face him. He caught a glimpse of dark eyes glinting behind the veil. What is it you want? She asked. A date, señorita. Just a date, Carlos beamed at her. She paused and said, I do not know. Ask me again in this place at this time tomorrow night, and we shall see. Carlos' heart leaped in his chest, so she was playing hard to get. Well, fair enough. He would see her tomorrow, and then she would fall into his arms. The next day dragged by for infatuated Carlos, and he had trouble concentrating on his work. But at last, he was free and running the few blocks to his home just to change into a suitable outfit. He could barely contain himself, and he reached the cemetery a few minutes early. She was not there yet, so Carlos entertained himself by picturing his beautiful bride in their new home. Suddenly she was there in front of him. The moonlight sparkled off her veil. Carlos was enchanted. They talked for hours, standing in front of the graveyard. She was as witty as she was beautiful, and Carlos begged her for a date. "We will go out tomorrow night," she said. "I will send you a letter with the place and time." Carlos kissed her hand and floated away, so happy he wanted to sing for joy. Carlos was absolutely useless at work the next day. After work, he rushed home and found a letter in his mailbox. Eagerly he read it, not pausing to wonder how she knew where he lived. Then he ran next door to show it to Diego, his closest cousin. Diego went pale when he read her signature, Rosa Gonzalez. This must be the same Rosa that died in a car crash last year. Diego tried to warn Carlos, but Carlos was already in love. That night, as Carlos hurried to the cemetery, Diego followed, certain that his cousin wasn't over his head. Carlos bounded over to Rosa. "At last we go out," he cried to her. "But first, my love, show me your face." At his words, Rosa pulled aside the veil. Back at the gate, Diego gave a gasp of shock, for she had the desiccated face of a skeleton. He was frozen to the spot by the power of the evil specter, unable to warn Carlos. Looking down, Carlos only saw the glamour the ghost was projecting. As the skeleton's withered arms trapped him, the veil on his eyes was lifted and he realized in one heart-stopping moment the abomination he was kissing. The ground opened up, and with a laugh of triumph, the specter pulled him down and down into her tomb. The earth closed over Carlos and Rosa. Diego, freed from the ghost's spell, ran into the cemetery, shouting his cousin's name in terror. But it was too late. Carlos was dead, locked for all time in Rosa's arms.